Gabriel's Gospel Grace, changing lives and kingdom building one stone at a time.
Well, good morning to you. I hope you're all waking up to a great new start on this Motivational Monday. And we are back to motivation this week. So the topic for today is overcoming obstacles. Now, what are obstacles? Well, basically anything that inhibits us from moving forward or prevents us from attaining something that typically will come against us. Now, often I'm talking about how the enemy comes against us, and there's no doubt about it. The enemy loves to put obstacles in our way. But often, obstacles are opportunities, something we can grow from or even take advantage of. It's just one of those things about how we look at our situations. And hopefully, in this episode today, we're going to look at some ways of handling it and possibly some tools to deal with the problem. But let's actually have a look at this. Let's assume we're trying to move along our path, and typically it's all been going well, and suddenly something stops us. There we are. We're travelling down our road, heading forward into the opportunities that lie ahead, and suddenly there is a rock. It's a big rock. What do we do about it? Especially if we're in a car. Well, we have a number of options, and I think the first thing is whenever we have an obstacle, we really do need to stop and look at it. And I do mean look at it. Like now, if that rock was in the road, we can either sit in the car and just simply stare out the window going, rock, or we go, okay, there's a rock, let's go and have a look at it, let's examine it. And I think in most situations you'll find I'm constantly talking about examining things and testing things. And that's because that gives us opportunity to see exactly what it is, investigate it, touch it, prod it, smell it, taste it, just engage with it. Find out exactly what it is, get the substance of what it is. So at the moment, obviously that looks like a rock, but what if it was sponge? What if it was cheese? We don't know till we investigate. So when we have an obstacle in front of us, let's examine it. Now this obstacle is obviously rock, and it's big. There's no way a car can get necessarily through it. But sometimes, let's assume it was a gate, we can open the gate and walk through it. It could be a puddle, we can go through it. Not all obstacles are solid like this one. So the first thing is, whenever we come across an obstacle, after investigating, it might be something we can simply plough through. Sometimes the illusion of something being solid in our way prevents us from moving forward just by the sight of it. But we shouldn't always believe what we see with our eyes. Investigate. So now we've investigated, we found it is a solid piece of rock, and that's sitting as high as, well, the windscreen. So that's definitely something we're not exactly going to drive through it. So what are our other options? Well, we could go around it. Now, clearly in a car we can't. We might have to get out of the car and walk around it if we want to keep going forward. And sometimes, let's think of it from a business organisational point of view, perhaps sometimes the organisation is just too big. Perhaps your ministry is too big. Perhaps you need to find a way of slimming down to fit around the object. So you see, even though we're looking at an object in a road, it is actually very much practical on how we look at the problem. If we were not so big and not so bulky, we can actually squeeze around this. So going around the object, and again, how do we go around an object? Well, perhaps sometimes it's just something that we don't have to actually address at this point in time. So, for example, the government may bring out some sort of new regulation that we all need to be mindful of that will affect all of our businesses, but it's not necessarily something to stop us today. It's something we can get around and deal with later. Or it might be simply a piece of legislation that might imply that you have to have certain requirements in place. And simply by finding that there's other aspects of what you do in your business or organisation, you already probably meet a different set of legislations and regulations that allows you to bypass that. So again, we have to investigate. We can get around a problem. What else can we do with this obstacle in our way? Well, the other option is to go over it. And going over a problem clearly means there's going to be a little bit more effort because we've got to climb on it. Now, in our car, could we go over it? Think on that. So also remember, if we're on top of the situation, since we've climbed on top of this rock, we now have a new vantage point. We can see the problem from a different perspective. Also, we can see what lies ahead. We can see even what's behind us. So sometimes when an obstacle comes up, it is an opportunity to get on top of that obstacle and actually reevaluate where you are in the landscape. Look at exactly what the situation is, and is that a path or a road you want to continue down? Sometimes that obstacle is a blessing in disguise because it allows you to say, well, look, if I carried on down this road, now that I've got a new vantage point, it actually would not have been beneficial. Or you realise going back, a retreat, so to speak, could be the best way forward. I think after the COVID pandemic, many businesses were constantly striving to drive forward that actually they failed and lost in the process. Whereas other businesses probably saw things on the horizon, slowed down what they were doing, perhaps ordered less in advance, or in other businesses, they probably ordered more. They ordered more, potentially knowing something could be around the corner. So, getting on top of a situation, an obstacle, can give us a new vantage point and also could give us new opportunity. By being on that vantage point, we might see the best place to be at this point in time is exactly where we are. In fact, where we are, if we were now driving an ice cream van, it might be we realise there's no opportunity laying ahead. But actually, where we are now, we could pitch. We could literally stick on our siren and allow people to come in and buy our goods. Now, I do keep giving business examples here, but I think it's just to point out that if we modify this to come to our lives, it's much more simplified. But I want to show that even in the bigger scenarios, these rules still apply. Now, the question asked a moment ago is, can we go over it? In the car? Yes. How? You might be asking. Well, effort again. To get over that rock, we might now have to build a ramp. More importantly, possibly a bridge. And a bridge is a good choice of words there because sometimes we have to bridge ourselves from one place to another. We basically have to step over something to get to somewhere else. Sometimes exactly that, getting over a river to go from one place to another requires a bridge. That bridge is then permanently there, allowing us to access both places from one to the other. But a bridge will possibly cost time, money, resources. Same as when we bridge a problem to get over it. There's going to be effort and application for sure. And that means that we have to apply ourselves to the problem. We can't get around it, as we said earlier. So yes, we can go over our problems. And as I say, they can be advantageous. What else can we do with our obstacle? Well, the not so obvious one is to go under it. Tunnelling. Now, of all of the options so far, that is clearly the most resource-driven, time-consuming, and also the not so obvious option. And that's what I wanted to point out in this scenario. When you think you've exhausted all of the obvious, there's sometimes the not so obvious. And of course, it is hidden in plain sight. We can clearly see there is the option of going under, but it's not typically what we would consider because in our day-to-day life, we're more likely to go through, over, and around, never under a problem. But it's possible, but takes more time. So, for example, let's assume you decided that you wanted to be a surgeon. Well, the biggest obstacle would probably be that you're not educated and certainly not qualified and in a position to get your medical requirements so that you can go into practice. In that case, it's not that the road is not there, it's the fact that you really have to dig deep. And it's going to take a long time, but you've probably got to go right back to start and start a whole new venture in life, a whole new education program, just so that you can dig under that problem and come out the other side being suitable, educated, meeting qualification requirements, and, of course, getting to your destination. That's an option that often people don't consider because everything in life today does seem to be a race. Everything, including your mobile phone. If people don't respond instantly, there's an assumption that they may have vanished, and or they may have a problem with you and they're not getting back to you for a reason. Patience, as they say, is a virtue, and dealing with obstacles is absolutely essential that you develop patience. So that's tackled nearly all, I say nearly all, of our options when an obstacle comes against us. But not quite. There is another one. And this is one that I certainly try and use as often as possible. And I think any born-again Christian believer should actually pay more attention to this one than the others. And that's the fact that when we have an obstacle in front of us, remove it. How do we remove it is the question. From a practical point of view, often it's an illusion. It's something that's not necessarily there. It's something that we see as a way of holding us back or an excuse not to progress. And I think, sadly, as people get older or more experienced in certain things, the ability to adapt and change and evolve is less appealing. So an obstacle is literally an excuse, and often it's seen exactly as the reason not to do something, whereas I've clearly been saying throughout this, obstacles are opportunities. But why did I say particularly for Christians? Well, the point is, we just had a rock in the road. But if I said, what if it was a mountain? I think many of you then understand what I'm saying. So let's look at a piece of scripture. Matthew 17:20. Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here or there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you." Now that's the key. The key is faith. In every situation, it's faith. Even if you wanted to requalify and go under the problem, you have to have faith that you're going to achieve it. When an obstacle comes against us, as I say, it may come from the enemy. But most typically, it's the fact that we're seeing it as an obstacle. And with a little bit of faith, even as small as a mustard seed, we could see that the opportunities are there if only we look through new eyes. Also, engage our imagination. See what's beyond the rock. As Jesus says, there is a mountain. And if we see the mountain, then it's an obstacle. But with faith, we see past the mountain, that we can move it. We literally move it out of the way and we continue moving forward. Now, faith is obviously the substance of things hoped for. The things that we don't necessarily tangibly see in front of us, but we believe will be there. So faith is a powerful tool. And in every situation as we move forward with motivation, you have to see something at the end, even though physically you don't necessarily see the evidence of it appearing. So to overcome your obstacles, as I've said today, don't let them inhibit you or obstruct you from your path or destiny as you see it. Look at the problem, evaluate it, investigate it. Look at all the options. Recognise that, like sowing a seed, it takes time, it takes application, it needs to be nurtured, nourished and grown. But above all, it needs faith. Faith to move you forward, faith to believe, and faith to know it is to come. Have a great week out there. May God's grace be with you. If you were blessed by this video, why not give it a like? Also subscribe to this channel and hit the bell icon to be notified of future videos.